So it's my honor today to introduce our speakers. The first of which I would say needs no introduction, but because we have so many guests and new members, I'll just say that Patti Limerick, who's one of our own in Boulder Rotary, is the faculty director and board chair of the Center for the American West at the University of Colorado Boulder, which, as many of you know, is been a major player in many historical things, including a lot of Native American issues, which Patti will tell us some about. But Patti is also a frequent columnist for the Denver Post. She's been our state historian from 2016 to 2018. She's was an appointee of the National Endowment for the Humanities by Barack Obama. I could keep going on, but it would take all morning and we don't have time. Our other guest that she's interviewing, Ava Hamilton, is a Native American Arapaho woman who's lived in Boulder since the 70s. She's a filmmaker and is an activist that we're going to hear all about after this short clip from one of her films.
Because otherwise we would be reenacting the TV show some of us remember, This Is Your Life, where we're behind a screen and then we come out and surprise you. So, but we are not doing that. So this is not your full life, Ava, but it is a segment of your life. I am really privileged to be the person interviewing here. I imagine quite a number of you would like to see the whole film that you just got to see the first 7 minutes of, and we can work on that and figure out a screening for that. I will tell you that there's really good news at the bedrock of our presentation today that well, first of all, let's say something, this is not good news, something went awry in the proofreading of the Center of the American West, and the description of the event that we sent to the RIB began with a sentence fragment. And I am asking you not to tell any of my students that I did that. And so the phrase artist historian, the combination was hanging there, but I must assure you that was not describing me. I am an historian, but nobody has ever imagined calling me an artist, and they would get over that fast if they saw me draw anything. So this is the artist historian who was referred to there, and she is part of a really extraordinary international movement and moment now, that there is so much going on in worldwide, and the importance of paying attention to Native voices, to indigenous people. There are so many different movements underway, and that includes enormous creativity of every possible form of expression. Native people are painting, sculpting, and drawing. They are writing novels and poems and memoirs. They are writing and performing plays. They are composing and performing music. They are choreographing and performing dance, and they are making films. And even as a word person, I will be the first to say and concede that a film carries a lot more force and reaches a lot more people and stands a much better chance of moving those people than a book would ever achieve. So it is really an honor for me to be here with my old friend, Ava. She was here since 1970. I came in 1984, and I'm sure you had many pleasant people to hang out with in those 14 years, but then I arrived and very soon after got to know her, and that has been a great joy for me. So we spoke earlier in the week, and when we talked earlier this week, I may not have told you that I was surprised when you spoke so positively about this historical time, and I was pleased to hear you testifying that you think this is quite a remarkable era for non-Indian people being curious and eager to learn about Indian people, and also a very good time to make sure that Indian people are hearing each other's voices and engaging with their own history in their own terms. So could you go on about that? Just tell us more about this moment and why you were so cheerful about it.
Well, I'm involved with Rising Voices, which is a group of scientists from the Boulder area and around the country, and indigenous peoples from around the coasts and all over wherever there are indigenous people being impacted by climate change. And a couple of years ago, in 2016, I took a cross-country tour from Flagstaff, Arizona to Philadelphia to attend a rally in support of public lands. And of course, you know, that's in danger right now. Our planet, our Mother Earth is in great danger, and all of humanity seems to be coming together, being aware of that and acknowledging each other's humanity. Mm-hmm. That's what I was talking about. But traveling across the country, we stayed with, it was a 3-van caravan of indigenous activists from different tribes, and we stayed with white people all across the country, including in Philadelphia for several days, and were treated very respectfully, and they were as knowledgeable about the environment as we are. And we were having the same dialogue everywhere, and it was really it was really a pleasant surprise for me to meet so many good white people.
Woohoo! Yay for white people! Yay! Yeah. A proud moment for us.
You know, there were since that time, just the humanity of our country and how the people are in our country, and particularly in Boulder. I've been very happy to be a citizen of Boulder, because growing up on a reservation close to a town in Wyoming, Riverton, Wyoming, you know, you experience just daily racism every time you have an encounter with a white person in town, or you go into a store or go anywhere. It was not easy to be Arapaho and to be treated that way. But I don't think I've ever been treated that way in Boulder, and that's one of the reasons why I continue to be here. But I have great hope for, even though scientists have given us now, I think, 12 years before there's really a great catastrophe in our lives, that we won't have good water to drink, good air to breathe, and because of those two things, our land and our plants and animals will be contaminated. And of course, we eat and drink all of that. So the cycle of life is going to be contaminated, and we may not survive. And it just seems like humanity is coming together and being respectful for life. And that's really what I see.
The phrase that I wrote down on Tuesday from you, we're going to figure it out, how to be human together.
Yeah.
Which is a wonderful phrase. And I'm going to just insert for a moment that as a Western American historian, I was always planning to write a book. I have about several thousand books that I was going to write that I didn't write. And one of them was going to be called The Friends We Could Have Been. Because on the Overland Trail, for instance, there's a number of people on the Overland Trail in the 1840s and 1850s, who, non-Indians, who write the things I have enjoyed the most on this trip was meeting Indians. Well, who knew that was happening? There's so many artworks. Charles Russell's paintings are all about, not all, but in part about Indian people and white people greeting each other as you were greeted on this cross-country trip. So there is a heritage there, and it is not a really well-known or written about heritage, but what a team project with a filmmaker this project could be, huh?
Well, I like to meet other Indians too.
Yeah.
It's really a relief to me knowing this history. This documentary we made, another Boulder producer and I, Gabrielle Desch, and I produced this during the 500-year anniversary of the United States. And we got applied for and got a MacArthur grant to do this. And we used all kinds of, we only had half an hour in which to represent all kinds of Native Americans, so we used poetry, we used the narrator. The narrator was Johnny Stiffarm, who was the compliance officer for Mayor Wellington Webb. She's an educated person. but we, or in Lyons poetry, we just used everyone's music and their thoughts and comments on who we are in this documentary. So it was big, inclusive.
The 500th anniversary of quite a terrible beginning, but I was just in a meeting with Johnny Stiffarm, and she's now an officer at Fort Peck doing bison reintroduction. Quite a number of the tribes are reintroducing buffalo, and that's what this great soul is doing now. So it's quite a, but okay, I want to make sure that we get this. How did you take up the art and craft of filmmaking? And was it mostly fun or burdensome to learn all the technicalities you have to have there?
Actually, I heard about Arapahos being in films when I was young, and my grandpa Tom and my grandpa Bill, who is also William Shakespeare, and they were in Tim McCoy's films, Western films, and so I knew about they would be the Indians and the white guys would be the cowboys, that kind of stuff out in the West. And most of the time, Hollywood just had an interpretation of who we are, because some of the Plains Indians were out in the Southwest, which we know is so incorrect. But anyway, so I was working for a place, and one of my responsibilities was to review information that spoke about who we are, and it was very poor, stereotypical. Film strips. Of course, this was before video, and so it was horrible. I said I could make a documentary, so I worked with a film company here in Boulder. I can hear that noise.
Someone is, I'm sure, working on that as we speak. Oh, that's the kind of faith I have in technology and people who manage technology.
So I worked for this film company here in Boulder, Center Productions, and they finally I said, well, I want to make a documentary, and they said, well, if you want to go to produce a documentary, you have to go to film school. So I went to film school. When I came back, I was still a production assistant, and they said, well, this is our company, we're the producers. They were my good friends too. So I said, okay, that made sense to me. So in '92, I had this opportunity. I declared myself to be a producer, and that
must have been a nice day to go to bed, not a producer, and wake up and be a producer. That seems really good.
Well, that's what it seems like. That's what everybody does.
Quite.
Yeah, you have to invest in yourself. You have to determine.
Have I told you I'm a professor? Have I told you that? I'm just being funny here. So I actually am a professor, but it's a good form of self-description if you can get.
So then that's when I worked on this documentary. And then the next documentary, it's hard to be an independent producer because the field is so great. I mean, it is all over the country, and your competition is fierce. And so I finally bought, in 1998, I think I was a Rockefeller Fellow for Media, and I thought, well, this will open doors for me. It didn't, no. Because there were other Rockefeller Fellows and experienced people. And I have yet to produce that documentary, which was on the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers on an event that happened here in Colorado. It's always about Indian history that I'm interested in, and telling our own stories. So right now I have three.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Could you tell us about the three things in the works?
Well, these are all passions of mine. The first one I've been working on for years is a work in progress called Our History, Our Memories, and it's about the Southern Arapaho people, of which I am a tribal member, and these are the people who lived right here in Boulder. And I didn't really know about our history because we learned what everybody else learned. We learned in public school, George Washington was the father of our country, and about Lincoln and all of that kind of stuff. We learned all of that. So we know a lot about white people in this country. But our histories we didn't learn about that. We had to kind of learn about that on our own. And it's getting better, but we still have work to do to be included in American history. American Indian history as part of American history, because people have misunderstandings about our relationship with the United States government. And so anyway, that's basically my first priority is our history, our memories about Arapaho people and how the policies of the United States government impacted us and why we're the condition that we are today.
And that is a doubled audience of Arapaho people themselves, or tripled, and other Indian tribes and non-Indians.
It's everything that happens to one tribe pretty much has happened to all the tribes and continues to happen today because of federal Indian law. If it applies to one federally recognized tribe, then it applies to all of us. But so that's
good.
That's my number one priority. The second one is on phonology. Phonology is observation of patterns like bird flight patterns, butterfly migration patterns, plant growing patterns, just different things like that, and indigenous knowledge. And indigenous knowledge is pretty much the same thing as phonology, because our peoples have been observing for thousands of years. You know, Zacharias Canuck, an Inuit filmmaker from Canada, said that he made a documentary called Inuit Knowledge and Climate Change, and where the Inuit people of Igloolik had observed that the axis of the Earth had changed. And so maybe about 5 years later, scientists discovered that the axis of the planet had changed, and it was partially the cause for climate change. So my observation is that science, Western science, is still catching up to indigenous knowledge, because they have been, the indigenous peoples have been observing life for thousands of years. So that's why I belong to this organization, even though I really don't like to go to meetings. I'm now on the board of the of the Rising Voices, and I'm on the planning committee in our conferences in May here in Boulder.
Is that right?
Where scientists and indigenous knowledge holders come together.
Will
So
there
that's
be any public events for
Yeah,
that?
it's a public event.
Okay, well, let's I'll be in touch and tell people about that.
I think we do have a website if you go to Rising Voices.
Right.
And
so-
it's free. Well, it's free. The conference is limited because of space.
Space, okay. And then the third project.
Yeah. So I'm involved in that, and right now my greatest concern is for what's happening in Brazil, for our Brazilian indigenous relatives down there, because Brazil is opening up the same way our land here has been opened up for development for the purpose of raising money and for corporations to earn money.
So your third project,
Yeah.
the third project that's in the works now.
Yeah, they're opening up in indigenous lands and cutting, forests, and that's the lungs of the planet.
But the Osage.
Yeah. So
The story about the Osage. I
Yeah.
want to make sure they hear about that. As you can
Oh,
see,
and-
because
and
I keep
then-
pushing you
yeah.
on that. So
well, my it's also dear to my heart is I have Osage friends, and I heard about this story about this 6 Osages were taken to France in the late 1800s, sort of like a Wild West show. And the entrepreneur guy who took him over there, this white guy, left him there because they quit earning money. So they were in France, these Osages, only speaking Osage, not knowing anybody. So they're basically street beggars. And they remembered, somebody in that group remembered that there had been a priest in Pawhuska, where they live in Oklahoma, in Montauban, France. So they made their way down there, and today there's a sister city relationship between Pawhuska and Montauban, and I want to make that documentary about the that village in France getting the Osages back, and how tribal the Osage people are. They have a 1 million acre reservation in Oklahoma, which I didn't know they had. And I think there's about 40,000 tribal members. And they still operate in a traditional manner where I think there's 5 villages, and each village is still run by a chief.
One reason you might not like going to meetings is that they have time restraints.
Oh, right.
And so I'm going to just ask you just to say just a second or two really about what you said on Tuesday about the unpredictability of life and the sadness and the happiness and how they endure. If you could just share that last remark and then.
Well, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I love the unpredictability of life. And that's the humanity of who we are. Is you just never can tell. If it was predictable, I think it would be quite boring and quite fascist.
Well, there's a word. That's a colorful word.
And it's some kind of bad word, you know. But the unpredictability of life is so precious.
And as you said, the sadness comes, but it's not for long, always. And just
so it's, you know that it's always gonna get better.
Thank you, Ava.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's see, words or not. Is it working? Okay. Now it's working. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and the story of your people with Patti and by extension with Boulder Rotary Club. It's a real privilege to hear people with a different cultural background and so forth, and the stories that they have to tell, which is much of what Rotary International is about anyway. I just want to share a remarkable coincidence with you that allows me to share your optimism about the increasing ability to work together. Just yesterday, we learned that the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, the people of the Dawn in Massachusetts, want the Mayflower Society to participate in their documentary. Which this is pretty remarkable, and so your statement that this is happening in other parts of the country is spot on correct, and we're privileged to be a part of that experience. As you both may know, Rotary International has been working for 26 years to abolish polio, and we are, as we like to say, this close right now. But in gratitude for your program and in your honor, Boulder Rotary Club is privileged to contribute 100 doses of polio vaccine in your honor. Thank you.